We are live skis. Live ski bob skis. Okie dokie. Here we go, skis. Jumping into How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age by Dale Carnegie. This is part 4, and we are very far behind schedule. Life is throwing everything it has at me at once, and I said that wrong, but we're going to push forward anyway. Life is throwing everything it has at me. I think I did say that. Never mind, I said that right. Any other way, moving on. Nonetheless, thank you everybody. Honestly, I want to say that first and foremost. It's been 9 days since I've streamed, and I've gained more subscribers than I've ever gained while I'm streaming. I think I gained like 20 something in the past 9 days, 30 something. Nonetheless, thank you everybody who recently subscribed, and I haven't been on to say thank you, so I'm saying it now. And yeah, I am not giving up yet. We are reading, and we are going to finish reading this book. 100 pages left. We are on page 101, but I am going to reread page 99 just because why not? This book is knowledge. This book is profound wisdom and anecdotal evidence that you can apply to your life. And you know, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you, but I have found a lot of what's in this to be super helpful. So without further ado, I am going to jump right in. And yeah, I'm gonna reread page 99. And we're back to page 99. Let me pull it up right here. And it is the last chapter of part 2. And I don't know exactly what the next chapter is. It says how to merit and maintain others' trust. So I guess it's about trust, but to give a recap real quick of what the main topics are, if you want to spoil and you don't want to watch my previous versions, which are posted on my Instagram and my YouTube. The basic gist of the book is they put a huge emphasis on if you want to win friends and influence people, you have to smile. Smiling is huge, okay? Smile when you talk. Smile when you're, smiling is huge. Another thing that's huge is listening. You have to sacrifice what you want to say in order to listen and truly understand what the other person is saying and ask questions about the other person. The next thing that's really huge is always leave people a little bit bigger or a little bit better than you found them in. What I mean by that is, like, a quote is, you know why I like you, Ike? Because you ain't no glory hopper. Like, I don't know. You know why I like you? Because you're real. Or, like, compliments and stuff, obviously, but genuine compliments. And that will take you further than you might realize. But as long as they're genuine, that's a huge key that this book is focusing and emphasizing on. But yeah, you gotta read it for yourself. I feel like I'm really getting into the meat of the book in the next 100 pages, so we'll really get to see exactly how to win friends and influence people. Great book, pretty simple vocabulary. Let's jump right into it. Part 3. Should I reread the last 99? Nah, I think I don't need to reread it. Go watch my last video posted on my story or wherever. YouTube. We're just gonna jump right into it. Page 101. Chapter Part 3, how to merit and maintain others' trust. I'm going to scoot on super close. And, yeah. Avoid arguments. That seems pretty logical. Like it's good advice. In their book, The Preacher and the Presidents, co-authors Nancy Gibbs and Michael Duffy detail the Reverend Billy Graham's... Someone is Snapchatting me. Anyway, Billy Graham's path of unlikely ascendance and unmatched influence, with not only 7 U.S. presidents, but also nearly every other global leader in the Western world. This path, they point out, was not without its resistance, especially early on. How Graham, whatever, dealt with one of his stauchiest opponents provides a preview of the first principle necessary for winning others' trust. In February 1954, they write Graham's patron Hence Luce wrote to Times Man in London, the legendary correspondent Andre Laguerre, to prepare him for what was about to come when Graham landed in London for a spring crusade. This was a time when church membership was much lower in Britain, between 5 and 15% of the population, and it was in the United States, 59%. Religion in Britain is near death. Luce noted, so Billy's impact will not be worth watching. Surely he will be scorned by all the people you know. One of those scorners, explained Gibbs and Duffy, was a columnist from the Daily Miner. A man named William Connor, who called Graham Hollywood's version of John the Baptist. As he often did with the prominent critics, Graham suggested they meet in person. Connor mischievously suggested a rendezvous at the pub called the Baptist Heed. As it turned out, neither Luce, Laguerre, nor Connor could estimate the effect Graham would have on the city. So many people came the first week that from then on he held their meetings at Haringey Stadium on Saturdays. Night after 11,000 people sat and another 1,000 stood in rain or sleet or cold to hear him preach. His audience included members of Parliament, an admiral, and the Navy Chief of Staff. Nor could the journalists estimate the effect Graham would have on them personally, especially William Connor. After meeting the preacher for a chat at the irrelevantly named pub, Connor the critic became Connor the admirer. I never thought, he confessed to Graham in a subsequent column, that friendliness had such a sharp cutting edge. I never thought that simplicity could cudgel us sinners so damn hard. We live and learn. That's such a beautiful sentence. I'm sorry. Never thought that simplicity could cudgel us sinners so damn hard. We live and learn. And I'm going to annotate that word cudgel real quick. And it's spelled C-U-D-G-E-L. And the definition is a short, thick stick used as a weapon. Beat with a cudgel. And the image for that, holy, look like a frickin' hammer club. Now that puts a way more violent image in my mind. Wow. Okay, moving on. I never thought... Okay, already read that. While Graham could have employed a front of passive aggression by ignoring the cheeky jabs, or fought the jabs with press-worthy indignation, he chose a higher road, a far more effective path. He avoided an argument altogether, and won his critic over with grace and goodwill. Arguing with another person will rarely get you anywhere. They usually end with each person more firmly convinced of his rightness. You may be right, dead right, but arguing is just as futile, as if you were dead wrong. Humorist Dave Barry made this point quite well when he said, "I argue very well. Ask any of my remaining ask any of my remaining friends. I can win in an argument on any topic, against any opponent. People know this, and steer clear of me at parties, often as a sign of their great respect. They don't even invite me." That's so sad. So how do you educate and debate? How do you debate without arguing? This is interesting stuff. They don't even invite me. So much of our time online is spent arguing or feeding arguments. Look no further than comments at the bottom of popular blogs and news sites. It's nearly always a string of he said, she said, or attempts at one-upmanship. Beyond that, the recent and ongoing corporate and political banter seems to primarily involve proving points and starting cases instead of finding common ground on which to build something of mutual value. Few of these arguments change people's minds because the arguments are digitally veiled and lack the clear-cut consequences of tangible confrontations. Both parties can get away with devolving into snarky personal attacks and passive ambiguity, the least effective tools of human relations. Such was the case when former BP chief executive Tony Hayward took a hard line of personal self-exoneration and arrogant apathy in reaction to the tragic Deepwater Horizon explosion and subsequent oil spill that took 11 human lives, ravaged the Gulf states' ecosystems, and devastated the livelihood of thousands more workers around the country. According to the article in the Times, he started by refuting scientific findings about the nature and amount of the spill. Then his contention that the spill was tiny compared to the size of the ocean, and the environmental impact of the America's biggest oil spill, and the 950,000 gallons of toxic dispersant that have been dispersant that have been used to treat it would be very, very modest. Set off a series of gaffes, Gaffes, jaffs from which he could not recover, including the backhanded apology to the people of Louisiana in which he stated, "I would like my life back." What a dick. Page 103. When 2 days after dodging questions and ditching blame before U.S. lawmakers, excuse me, he was found in Cowes on the southern coast of England for a yacht race in which his boat, Bob, was entered, it merely highlighted that had already been established whether or not he was right. Hayward had lost both his celebrity or credibility and his case in court of public opinion. When influence and impact are at stake, it is often the only court that matters. Let me reread that. That was a little bit choppy. Sorry, guys. When, 2 days after dodging questions and ditching blame before U.S. lawmakers, he was found in Cowes on the southern coast of England for a yacht race in which his boat, Bob, was entered. It merely highlighted what had already been established. Whether or not he was right, Hayward had lost both his credibility and his case in the court of public opinion. When influence and impact are at stake, it is often the only court that matters. Damn. When influence and impact are at stake, it is often the only court that matters. The court of public opinion. After his line of argument, few could trust the man. He seemed to care about two things, and two things only: himself and his empire. Under his argumentative approach, BP quickly went from suspect to reject, regardless of what story the facts would turn out to tell. Whether BP was sold to consumers, boycotting began. Why fill up at BP station when there were a dozen others belonging to companies that didn't have fearlessly uncaring leaders trying to argue their way to exoneration? Some of the chain of reaction was based on perception, of course, but reality remains perception when the facts aren't clear. And when the case is in the realm of human relations, perception is often so strong that even irrefutable facts are not enough to supplant the wave of bad press that preceded them. In Hayward's defense, after his dismissal from BP, a day he called one of the saddest of his life, he was far more empathetic, not only about his company's role in the spill, but also about his approach to the tragedy. Friends Lloyd Hayward, as kind and generous family man, and three is no doubt they have good reason. Furthermore, BP has been a solid, respectable company for decades. Both deserve to be valued for their finest moments, no less than any of us would had our argumentative approach with a spouse, colleague, or client been widely publicized, and both Hayward and BP still likely will. But why not avoid the valleys in the first place? We will face conflict nearly every day of our lives. So how do we prevent a tactful decision from becoming an aggressive argument? In the end, you must value interdependence higher than independence, and understand that differential negotiation is more effective in the long run than non-compliant crusade. These are some pretty big concepts here. So let me annotate that paragraph real quick because that's important. Interdependence. I've never even heard of that word before. I'm sure I have, but I've never understood it. And the definition is the dependence of two or more people or things on each other. Okay, so mutual beneficiary, is the word I was thinking of. Higher than independence, and understand that the differential negotiation is more effective in the long run than non-compliant crusade. I'll save that line for later. Let me just write it down real quick and we'll move on. Differential negotiation is more effective in the long run than non-compliant crusade. That was a pretty cool quote there. One South American leader has proven this principle merit despite great historical and personal odds. For a man who came from poverty, who led a labor union in a country not known for workers, writes who watched his wife die when she was 8 months pregnant because they couldn't afford adequate health care, and who formed his own political party, one might expect a fighter. But Luis Inacio Lula de Silva, called Lula by all, defied expectations at every turn. My mother always said 2 people can't fight if one person doesn't want to. Yeah, but that's a very pacifistic-y philosophy right there. It's like, how do you get anything done? Two people. Maybe this is where I start to really learn. Promise I won't write down every single word. Two people can't fight if one person doesn't want to. I mean, obviously, am I right? Alright. Two people can't fight if one person doesn't want to. Okay. Lula told a reporter once. And so Lula doesn't fight. An approach that helped him become the president of Brazil and hold the position for almost 10 years. What? That's crazy. Alright, I'm actually listening now. When his newly formed Socialist Party lost elections year after year, he developed an alliance with a right-wing party and courted business leaders despite his social goals. When he became president on the promise to prioritize the impoverished in Brazil, he also built alliances with Brazil's wealthy and vast upper class by focusing on growing the economy. I consider myself a negotiator. If we want peace and democracy, we have to be tolerant to negotiate more. He has said Lula's tolerance and negotiation helped him achieve astounding things during his time in office, through building alliances both domestically and internationally. He enacted social programs that pulled more than 20 million people out of poverty into the middle class, while also creating a period of strong economic growth and stability in a country known for the vast divide between the rich and the poor. Lula's people skills put Brazil on course to reverse historical inequalities. The notion of communication has begun greatly misinterpreted, explains corporate behavioral specialist S. Gels, Esser, Esthergales. That's weird. Weird name. Esther Gels, Gles, whatever. We have come to believe it is all about the delivery. In doing so, we regularly forfeit the full potential of our exchanges. Gillies reminds the executives and employees of corporate clients such as 20th Century Fox, Leo Burnett, and Harpo Incorporated that there is an important reason all personal growth techniques spring from the act of listening to your inner wisdom. Inside us all is a vault of better self-understanding, higher knowledge, and greater ideas. She explains, tension and conflict occur when you and or those with you discard the notion that others also have inner wisdom that ought to be heard. How then do we build a practice of avoiding arguments? See the singular advantage of operating interdependently? Bro, I don't know if I'm ready for this wisdom. So much. This occurs, says Gels, when you acknowledge that greater interpersonal results, by the way, page 105, greater interpersonal results are always more probable when you experience and insight are compounded with that of others. No matter how expressive or persuasive you might be, this does not occur by one person trumping another. It occurs when the end result of the tension is a mutual stretching of insight and personal growth. And if you can see your interactions clearly, despite tension and conflict, there is little you can't accomplish in collaboration with others. All of us know how to get attention, asserts Jellies. But few of us know how to get attention and respect at the same time. Set yourself apart by being one who avoids the arguments that most jump into with both feet. The best solution, wisest decision, and brightest idea nearly always exists outside of what one party brings to the table. Yet we find it quite easy to declare another person wrong, often before we've taken the time to consider what he or she is saying. Even when we believe another is wrong, there is only one way to guarantee an inevitable. I know it's saying uninevitable, but it's not. Uninviable. Okay, there we go. Uninviable end. Let me reread that. There is no way to guarantee an uninviable end to an interaction and all chance of connection or meaningful collaboration, and that is to tell the other person we think so. Those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. Those who learn the wrong lesson from the past may be equally doomed, writes Harvard Business School professor and co-author of negotiation genius Deepak Malhotra in the opening of a Forbes.com article comparing the 2011 NFL revenue share with a similar dispute between the owners and the players of the National Hockey League in 2004. In both disputes, the owners concerned about rising costs asked the players to accept a smaller... Excuse me. Oh, feel tired. Sorry about that. Life. Reality. Where was I? In both disputes, the revenues see proof of rising costs. In both disputes, the owners initially refused... the players rejected... accepted a smaller share of the league's revenues. In both disputes, the players rejected the owners' request and asked to see proof of the rising costs. In both disputes, the owners initially refused to substantial their claims, and the NHL. The situation turned dire because neither would back down. Accusations of greed were rampant, explains Malhotra, unable to bridge the divide even months after the collective bargaining agreement had expired. The NHL eventually canceled the season. $2 billion in revenue were lost. Was the result a foregone conclusion, according to Malhotra? It was avoidable if only the sides had understood the basic human relations problem at the heart of the matter. Both sides lost the season because the owners refused to acknowledge that players had legitimate concerns by seeing them as greedy rather than mistrusting. The owners adopted the wrong strategy that's a big word. Intransigence rather than transparency for too long. Time to annotate. And it's spelled INTRANSIGENCE, and it means refusal to change one's views or to agree about something.
Intransigence.
Intransigence. It's a cool word. Okay. So, both sides lost the season because the owners refused to acknowledge that players had legitimate concerns by seeing them as greedy rather than mistrusting. The owners adopted the wrong strategy, intransigence rather than transparency, for too long. The dispute fell into the trap of I'm right, you are wrong, because neither would consider the alternative that perhaps both were right. There is a critical lesson here. Negotiations become more, page 107, productive, concludes Malhotra, when each party acknowledges that the other party may have legitimate concerns. In the NFL dispute, both the owners and the players need to bring a more nuanced perspective to the bargaining table, where fans across America may be doing something other than watching pro football games next fall. Nuance or subtle difference is a critical concept to remember in the midst of a disagreement. In other disputes, our differences with others are far subtler than we allow ourselves to see. We so easily treat dissonance like a chasm that cannot be crossed. The only resolution being one party taking a dive or being shoved off the cliff, so that only one party remains. It's far from the truth. Friendship that insists upon agreement on all matters is not worth the name. I'm gonna write that down because that's powerful. It's not even a book reading anymore. It's me writing down everything and you just watching me write down stuff. Friendship that insists upon agreement on all matters. Friendship that insists upon agreement in all matters is not worth the name. That is huge. Exhorted Mahatma Gandhi. Friendship to be real must ever sustain the weight of honest differences, however sharp they may be. The truth is that disagreement is more often a small crack in the sidewalk that can easily be negotiated if we come to the discussion table with a more open mind. Friendship, to be real, must ever sustain the weight of honest differences. We talk because we know something, explained corporate behavioral specialist Esther Gills in a recent interview, or we think we know something, or in the workplace because there is an expectation that we should know something. This expectation of knowledge tends to work against us in interactions because it closes off our minds to the possibility that exists outside of knowledge we bring to the table. We enter interactions with cooperation in mind, and if that cooperation does not come, we spend the remainder of the interaction attempting to either rebuke the other's assessment or rebuke the other's right to make an assessment in the first place. The result is that collaboration, or the possibility of it, is forfeited. In that your approach, you will rarely progress far in the relationships. All effective problem solving, collaboration, and dispute resolution, said Gels, begins with emptying of the mind, of what we know or what we think we should know. This can feel incredibly unnatural, she admitted, because we have been trained to demonstrate what we think to show our knowledge, our smarts. We think, therefore we talk. Yet by approaching a conversation with a blank slate, no way. I was just listening to Taylor Swift Blank Space, and I don't know. This book is just hitting hard right now. Oh my god. That's any of the way. With a blank slate, we take a humbler and more honest approach. We acknowledge the possibility that we may not know all the facts, and that we may not in fact be the only one who is right. Better yet, we create the possibility for meaningful collaboration, the melting of thoughts, ideas, and experiences into something greater than the sum of two parties. The notion that we might not be the only one who is right, and that we may in fact also be wrong, is of course nearly always the case, but we seem so averse to admitting it. Why is that? More often than not, it is because we value personal victory over collaborative possibility. Yet in doing so, we not only stunt the relationship, we also punt the probability of greater progress. than we originally considered. We expect too little if in the midst of disagreement we only seek a winner. Jules shared the following story from her experiences with a well-known media conglomerate whose swift responses to the national disaster caused an aftermath of in-house conflict. Her cell rang at midnight. It was the president of a media conglomerate that had retained her. The man named, or the man needed Gels to facilitate a meeting first thing in the morning to deal with an assembly line of catastrophes. The president was referring to the Hurricane Katrina tragedy in the wake of one United States' worst natural disasters. His company has swiftly deployed 90% of its employees to various regions of the Gulf Coast. No planning, no strategy, just some general discussion or instructions to come back with the important stories. Now, 2 weeks later, the teams had returned to the realities of resuming business and severely disjointed aftermath. Excuse me. I have 4 production teams fighting about whose coverage should take priority. The president explained, I have legal fighting with production about waiting for proper vetting, and I have accounting fighting with with everyone about divvying up the huge expense of the whole thing. He paused briefly, then went on to tell her how much it had cost, 6 times more than any previous production. Gell's rules said the president was to meet with all the bickering leadership teams and help them talk it out. Gels knew precisely what to do. Page 109. The next morning, as she sat in the auditorium where the meeting was to be held, she watched a familiar sight. The executives and their senior staff each entered the auditorium metaphorically, carrying a case. The case they would state to win the dispute. As they settled into their seats, she jumped in with an invitation. I would like everyone to take a moment and ask yourself this question. What could I have done differently during this assignment that would have helped the other department succeed? In her head, Gels says she could hear a series of thuds and the talking heads dropped their verbal cases to the floor. Ears then perked up around the room as one by one the team leaders shared their in the future we could thoughts. The CFO began by suggesting that his accounting and production teams could lay out a preliminary budget for projects. We don't have time. The executive vice presidents of production barked back for setting around and making budgets when a story is breaking. Gels interviewed with a question. Can you see why accounting is suggesting this practice? So we don't overspend, the executive vice president replied. Accounting, Gels added, has an imperative function for the survival of this company, equally as important as production. She then asked the chief financial officer and the executive vice president of production, could your 2 departments collaborate on creating a preliminary budget for weekly assignments and a breaking news budget with moving caps based on crisis proportions? Both needed. The meditation moved on. The company's chief counsel suggested legal could compose a most common vetting problems document so production would know beforehand how to avoid long vetting processes. Gels looked to the executive vice president, who was nodding. That would be very helpful, she agreed. Done, replied the chief counsel. The meeting continued in this manner, even going so far as to roll out specifics of suggested items, including budget and documents. Within 30 minutes, everyone in the room was in agreement about the solutions. The meeting was formally adjourned, and it was then that perhaps the most surprising thing of all happened. Many executives and their staff stayed behind to capitalize on the collaboration momentum. As Jules picked up her bag to leave, the president approached. In 25 years, she asserted, I have never attended a meeting where there were more people listening than talking. In the spirit of all great artisans who began with only a blank page, white canvas, or a lump of clay, we must enter all disputes with a mind open to what more we might discover and produce together. Only then can our true interpersonal potential be tapped. On June 26, 2000, in the White House East Room, where Teddy Roosevelt used to box, where Army Carter had her high school prom, where Lewis and Clark once camped in their tents, President Bill Clinton announced the completion of the first survey in the entire human genome. Humankind is on the verge of gaining immense new power to heal, he remarked. Next to him stood Dr. Francis Collins, noted geneticist and the head of the Human Genome Project. For 7 years, he had led an international team of more than 1,000 scientists in what Time journalist Madeline Nash called the challenge of pulling off a technological tour de force that many ranked alongside splitting the atom and landing men on the moon. There is only one human genome project, and it will happen only once, Collins said at the time. The chance to stand at the helm of that project and put my personal stamp on it is more than I could imagine. That Collins had to do it while competing against a former colleague made it all the more interesting. In May 1998, 5 years after Collins agreed to helm the project, Craig Venter, a passionate NIH biologist who was among the countless scientists dedicated to harness genomes to cure diseases, announced that he was founding a company to scoop Collins' project by 4 years. Page 111. The race, quote-unquote, between Collins and Venter made the great press central to ongoing commentary were the two men's very different personalities. One brash, one reserved, and Collins, the reserved one, had little choice but to compete. Doing so meant getting scientists from 6 countries, numerous government agencies, and many more numerous university labs to work together for a common interest rather than individual glory. So it was even more remarkable that the East Room, the day Francis Collins introduced Craig Venter this way, articulate, provocative, and never complacent, he was ushered in a new way of thinking about biology. It was an honor and a pleasure to invite him to tell you about this landmark achievement. Collins chose a path of cooperation and partnership and resisted the temptation to proclaim Venter wrong. Ultimately, he merely saw him as different, but different didn't have to mean opposed. While Collins admits that two are different people, wired in a different way, Time Nash points out, Collins now says that he considers Venter to have been a stimulant in a very positive way. At the heart of the assertion, the others are wrong, is actually an unspoken admittance that we don't want to be rejected. It is in the spirit of not wanting to be wrong ourselves that we project that role on others. If not for a pointing patent leather reminder, Dale Carnegie himself would have fallen prey to this inevitable reaction. Shortly after the close of World War I, he was the business manager for Sir Ross Smith. During the war, Sir Ross has been the Australian ace out in Palestine shortly after peace was declared. He astonished the world by flying halfway around it 30 days. No such feat had ever been attempted before. It created a tremendous sensation. The Australian government awarded him $50,000. The King of England knighted him, and for a while he was the talk of the global town. Carnegie was attending the banquet one night in Sir Ross's honor, and during the dinner, the man sitting next to him told a humorous story that hinged on the quotation, "There's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough hew them how he will." The racketeer mentioned that the quotation was from the Bible. He was wrong, and Carnegie knew it positively. But his own admission, he appointed himself as an unsolicited and unwelcome committee of one to correct the storyteller. He appointed himself as an unsolicited and unwelcome committee of one to correct the storyteller. Let me write this word down. I'm not going to annotate it. I'm just going to write it down for later. Alright. The other man stuck to his guns from Shakespeare. Absurd! The quotation was from the Bible, and the man knew it. Frank Gammond, an old friend of Carnegie, was seated to his left. Gammond has devoted years to studying the study of Shakespeare, so the storyteller and Carnegie agreed to submit the question to the expert. Mr. Gammond listened, kicked Carnegie's under the table, and then said, "Dale, you're wrong, and the gentleman is right. It is from the Bible." On their way home that night, Carnegie said to Mr. Gammond, "Frank, you knew that question was from Shakespeare." "Yes, of course," he replied. Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 2. "But we were guests at a festive occasion, my dear Dale. Why prove to a man he is wrong? Is that going to make him like you? Why not let him save his face? He didn't ask you for your opinion. He didn't want it. Always avoid the acute angle." I don't know about this. This seems kind of shady to me. This seems like you're lying. Like, if I got a fact wrong, I would want to know I'm wrong. So I don't go through life saying, guess what? This Shakespeare quote is from the Bible. Or whatever bullshit I'm saying that's wrong. Like, it shouldn't matter if they like you or not. It's just a bad tactic. It taught Carnegie a lesson he never forgot. Telling people they are wrong will only earn you enemies. Few people respond logically when they are told they are wrong. Most respond emotionally and defensively because you are questioning their judgment. You shouldn't just avoid the words, "you are wrong." You can tell people they are wrong, but by a look or an intention or a gesture. So you must guard against showing judgment in all of the ways that you communicate. And if you are going to prove anything, don't let anybody know of it. It is easy to allow a certain tone to creep into our online communication, a tone that tells another person that we believe he or she is wrong. Sometimes we don't even realize that tone is there until we read that we've written something later. We believe we are being diplomatic, but each word, page 113, each word presented in absence of expression or soft tone of voice is usually a condemnation. This is one of the reasons settling disputes is best accomplished in person. Instead of presenting a truncated argument through email, IM, or Twitter, create a more respectful, conciliatory environment for a conversation. Then offer your point with an open mind. While you in fact might be right and the other person wrong, there is no sense in denting a person's ego or permanently damaging a relationship if you remember those who obstinately insisted you were wrong. You can be certain others will remember you in the same negative light if you choose to turn an interaction into the opportunity to teach a lesson instead of a chance to strengthen a relationship. Always default to diplomacy. Admit that you may be wrong. Concede that the other person may be right. Be agreeable. Ask questions, and above all, consider the situation from the other's perspective and show that person's respect. Such a humble approach leads to unexpected relationships, unexpected collaboration, and unexpected results. Only slightly less than a cliche than the check is in the mail is that the ref blew the call. While the sport and circumstances vary, referees regularly make mistakes. Occasionally the consequences are significant. Around the world some are so famous they have their own monikers. Take the hand of God. Goal, for instance. In the 1986 World Cup quarterfinals, Argentina and England were locked in scoreless tie when Argentina's captain Diego Maradona leapt high in the air over goalie Peter Shilton and punched the ball into the net. The referee, Ali Ben Nassar, didn't see the handball and ruled the goal legal. Then there was Jeffrey Meyer in the 1996 American League Championship Series. The Orioles led the Yankees 4-3. That's a cool name, the Hand of God. Yankees 4-3 in the bottom of the 8th inning when Yankees shortstop Drecker Jeter hit a long fly ball into the right field. The 12-year-old Meyer reached over the wall and caught the ball, preventing owner's right field Tony Tarasco from making the play. Umpire Rich Garcia improperly called a home run instead of an out or automatic double. The Yankees went on to win the game. And to those incidents, 10,000 other blown calls and fan exasperation at referee errors can be faintly understood. Certainly, we are passionate about our teams, but referees are human after all, and we can understand making mistakes. What mistakes exasperation linger, however, is the inability of unwillingness of the referees to admit their mistakes. That is what makes one of the worst examples of a referee error so extraordinary and ultimately redeeming. It's been called the perfect game robbery since 1900. The generally recognized start of a baseball modern era, nearly 400,000 games have been played in the United States. During this span, only 18 times has a pitcher delivered perfection, retiring every opposing batter in order without giving up a walk or a hit, and without his teammates putting a runner on base with an error. To put this in perspective, the odds of a perfect game being thrown in a baseball, 1 in 20,000, are far smaller than any chance you will be struck by lightning in your lifetime. That's impressive. But a perfect game is precisely what Detroit Tigers pitcher Mando Galarraga had happening one early June evening in 2010. He'd recorded 26 consecutive outs and had gotten the 27th batter to tap a weak ground ball to the first baseman. Gallagher ran from the mound, took the throw from the first baseman, tagged the bag around and the runner, and got ready to celebrate. There was only one problem. The umpire, Jim Joyce, swung his arms wide and shouted safe. Gallagher's perfect game had been lost in one of the most egregious blown calls in sports history. I would be so pissed. But here's where things took an equally unexpected turn. It is perhaps the most significant and memorable detail of the story. When he got back to the umpire's locker room, Joyce immediately cued the game video and watched the play. Only once he saw how badly he'd blown the call, but instead of letting the dust settle in silence like so many of his colleagues, Joyce chose a different path. He walked straight to the Detroit Tiger locker room and requested an audience with Gallagher. Face red as a tomato, tears in his eyes, he hugged Gallagher and managed to get out 2 words before dissolving into tears. Lo sentio. He apologized boldly and unreservedly. In doing so, he changed sports history. There had been a previous perfect game in baseball, but this was the first redemption game. There are many things that are common to us all: birth, death, and lifetime full of mistakes, errors, and gaffes. We all know this, and the vast majority of our mistakes, while temporary, frustrating, and even maddening to others, are forgivable. I hope so. I really do. Why then do we have such hard time admitting them? Take Tiger Woods, for example. His Thanksgiving night car crash outside his home quickly triggered seemingly endless accusations and allegations of extramarital affairs. Where once rumors of affairs would be passed around town as unsubstantial gossip, our digital age can broadcast, accuse, and convict almost overnight. Wood's response: a prepared, vague admission of his transgressions and a request for privacy. His professional and personal world soon collapsed around him. Sponsors dropped him, his wife left him, and his golf skills suffered greatly. Could he have taken a different road? Of course. In the first weeks of breaking news, before the fallout of endorsement deals being canceled or Wood's wife's departure, PR expert pointed to a different approach that could have stopped the bleeding much sooner. In a Phoenix Business Journal article, journalist Mike Sonix cited Abby Fink of HMA Public Relations. Fink said Woods and his camp chose silence over getting in front of a story that ended up being driven by TMZ and the National Enquirer. In the absence of anything coming from Tiger, the media will go find sources elsewhere. And after today's news, it will appear that there are plenty of people willing to share a side of the story, Fink said. Troy Corder, a principal with critical public relations in Phoenix, said the Woods camp made numerous mistakes, including essentially lying, hunkering down with a bunker mentality, and not being ready to respond to tabloid reports, which have been true in part. A sincere and swift apology, publicly made, would have brought him to earth in the right sort of way. He had been an untouchable icon. A quick and empathic admission not only would have cleared the air, but also would have confirmed to people he was like all of us, human, mistake-prone, and messy, something we all knew anyway. That would have only helped him return to others' good graces much sooner. Digital Royalty CEO Army Martin observed at the time. Tiger should humanize his brand via social media outlets, specifically with Twitter and real-time raw video. His Facebook presence has a polished and promotional tonality, leaving fans wanting a glimpse behind the scenes. If he had allowed people to see the person behind the superstar personality, perceptions and expectations could have been different in recent events. Page 117. I need to get water, though. Oh. Page 117. There's no water around me. I'll be right back. Water break. Give me literally 30 seconds. Less than 30 seconds. Give me 20 seconds. We're back. It's the spot. That's good water. Okay. It's okay water. It's in plastic, so what can you do? Unfortunately, it was not. You can get your water from the spring. That's what you can do. Unfortunately, it was not the Road Tigers team, or distilled water, or reverse osmosis water. Unfortunately, it was not the Road Tigers team chose after the events that charged the course of his career, and the dust took much longer to settle. Such is the effect of ignoring this principle in the digital age. Negative news spreads faster than ever. Excuse me. If you've made a mistake, it is far better than you control the news being spread. It is far better that you control the news being spread. Come clean quickly and convincingly. One reason we find it so difficult to admit our faults is that we are inclined to forget the messages that apologies bear. This forgetfulness is all the more dangerous today. If we admit our faults immediately and emphatically, it is like shooting a full-page press release across the wires that confirms we genuinely care about the people we hurt, that we are humbled, and that we want to make things right. People rarely hold on to anger and disappointment when they see that we view ourselves and the situation properly. We are much more forgiving of those who are willing to come clean right away. Contrast the public views today of baseball slugger Jason Gamby, who immediately and tearfully admitted steroid use as the scandal was coming to light, against former slugger Mark McGwire, who waited 5 years to clear the air. Gamby had his life back rather quickly. The public was gracious and quick to forgive, while McGwire certainly had his reasons for delaying his explanation. Many baseball fans' minds he forever wears a scarlet S on his chest. A half-decade after his stellar career ended, he still remained a long way from receiving the Hall of Fame induction that was once a foregone conclusion. If we are aloof and ambiguous about our mistakes, we also shoot out a full-page press release, but one that reads, "I would like my life back." While we'd all like our pre-mistake lives back after a mistake has been made, we have to remember that no one changed the circumstances but us. It is not others' duty to give us back the life we took from ourselves. Only we can get our life back. That always begins with admitting our faults quickly and emphatically. What all of us at one time or another forget is that there is a certain degree of satisfaction in having the courage to admit one's errors. It not only clears the air of guilt and defensiveness, but also often helps solve the problem created by the error much quicker. Ronald Reagan was also known as the Great Communicator because, to the joy of his supporters and the consternation of his critics, consternation, that's a good word. Let me write that down. Consternation. The consternation of his critics, he could move from a place of defensive weakness to undeniable strength with a simple quip. That's another good word. Quip. Q-U-I-P. With a simple quip. One of his tired and true methods, and easy familiar with the apology during one particularly rocky patch of his presidency, he poked fun at his own White House, conceding, "Our right hand doesn't know what our far right hand is doing." Reagan knew it was easier to bear self-condemnation than condemnation from others. If we know we are going to be rebuked anyhow, isn't it better to beat the other person to the punch? When we recognize and admit our errors, the response from others is typically forgiveness and generosity. Quickly the error is diminished in their eyes. It is only when we shirk responsibility or refuse to admit our errors immediately that we raise the ire of those around us, and the original misjudgment seems to grow in importance and negative effect. Today we have the opportunity to broadcast our apologies to let everyone involved know we made an error and are sorry for it. We nip negative opinions in the bud when we take the action that we gain people's respect because it takes courage to admit our faults publicly. It also takes courage to admit our faults privately. Consider our families, how hard it is for our husbands and wives to admit their mistakes to each other. It's akin to stabbing yourself in the gut, but no matter what the mistake may have been, It is crucial to choose the path of humility and rely on the power of forgiveness. Anne was a successful finance executive and mother of three, honor graduate of Ivy League school. She never really failed at anything. She married the man of her dreams, and then one night found herself hanging out with some of her buddies from work while at an out-of-town convention. One drink led to another. One drink led to two, and two to four, and the group of buddies got smaller until it was just a male coworker and her. They decided to leave the bar, and in the elevator they kissed. A few more floors and footsteps later, they stood outside her hotel room. She opened it, they kissed again. Then they stopped. He backed away, and so did she. Each was married. They loved their spouses. They kissed again, and then they stopped. And he left, and the door closed behind him. Anne went to bed alone, and they woke up to the nightmare that she betrayed the man of her dreams. She went home 2 days later and said nothing for 6 years. It was a mistake, one-time mistake, with only one witness who wasn't going to say anything either. The years passed with the memory locked away in the mental and emotional safe. She knew that if the secret got out, it would be the end of her. As the one who had it all together, the one who made no mistakes. But one evening, while on vacation, she told her husband everything. He looked at her and started crying. It's just hard to read this right now because it's highlighting a lot of things that I've been going through in my life. Good book. It's a damn good book. Where was I? I just take it from this part. If we are aloof and ambiguous about our mistakes, we also shoot out a full-page press release, but one that reads, "I would like my life back." While we like our pre-mistakes lives back after a mistake has been made, we are to remember that no one changed the circumstance but us. It is no other's duty but to give us. I already read all of that. Great communicator. Did I scroll down a page? Okay, yeah, I did scroll down. He looked at her and started crying. Of all the reactions she considered, that hadn't been one of them. Over the next several weeks, they talked to each other, to their friends, and to their pastor. Her husband grieved, and with every minute of his grief, her own heart broke. But something else broke as well. Her mask of perfectionism. As friends learned of her mistake, she was overwhelmed by the very thing she never considered possible: grace and forgiveness. She discovered that the truth did indeed have the power to set her free. Anne's mistake was not without consequence, but in admitting the mistake and seeking forgiveness, she allowed room for a different perspective on her life, a perspective in which she was safe being imperfect. If only she had given herself room 6 years sooner. The same perspective exists for us all, if we are brave enough to own it. Any fool can defend a mistake, and most fools do. But admitting your mistake raises you above the pack and gives you a feeling of exultation. Page 120. At the end of 2010, people in the sports world engaged in the casual end of the year discussion about whom Sports Illustrated would name as its Sportsman of the Year. The honor ended up going to New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees for leading the once helpless Saints to their first ever Super Bowl victory. It was a fitting selection, but Chris Harry of AOLnews.com believed two different men should have shared the prize instead. As far as sheer sportsmanship, to me, nothing compared to the fallout from the night. Excuse me. From the night of June 3rd. Harry goes on to recount the new famous story of the blown perfect game and concludes, about 16 hours later, the Tigers and Indians played again. But the meeting that mattered came. Before the game, when Gallagher was tabbed for the trip to home plate to turn in the lineup card, Joyce was waiting for him. The two exchange handshakes and hugs in one of the most inspiring, emotional, and moving displays of sportsmanship any sport had ever seen. It was a movement It was a moment worthy of being relived and helped us learn a lesson about invoking class and dignity when circumstances very easily, especially in this day and age, could have brought about very different reaction. Oh, the power of two words to change everything. Lo siento. I'm sorry. Successful leaders begin in a friendly way. Successful leaders are always initiators, writes leadership expert John C. Maxwell in his flagship book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. He then recalls that successful leaders are always initiators. He then recalls an instance where beginning in a friendly way was not only necessary but highly recommended. Still a young man, he had been hired to take over the leadership of a troubled church in Lancaster, Ohio, where he was told, a large and intimidating man named Jim Butts, the elected lay leader of the congregation, was the most influential person in the organization. He was told Jim had a reputation for maverick behavior that at times had led the church down the wrong path. The first thing Maxwell did was arrange a meeting with Jim in his office. It could have been an awkward or even grossly misperceived moment. A 25-year-old rookie summoning the 65-year-old patriarch to meet with him. But Maxwell dispelled that notion immediately. That second Jim sat down, Maxwell began with a humble acknowledgement of the situation. Jim was the influence in the church, and Maxwell wanted to work with him, not against him. Maxwell then suggested they meet once a week for lunch to talk through the issues and make decisions together. While I'm the leader here, said Maxwell, I'll never take any decision to the people without first discussing it with you. I really want to work with you. We can do a lot of great things together at this church, but the decision is yours. Oh, excuse me. It's like 1:40 a.m. where I am right now. When we finished, Maxwell explains, Jim didn't say a word. Jim didn't say a word. He got up from his seat, walked into the hall, and stopped to take a drink of water at the water fountain. I followed him out and waited. After a long time, he stood up straight and turned around. I could see that the tears were rolling down his cheeks, and then he gave me a great big bear hug and said, You can count on me to be on your side. Friendliness begets friendliness. We are more inclined to agree with another person or see things from his perspective when we have friendly feelings toward him. If, in contrast, we feel a person is busy or brusque or uninterested in sharing a common courtesy, we tend to mirror the sentiment. This is a difficult obstacle to overcome, whether you've just met the person or have known him for a while. So let me write that down. It says, friendliness begets friendliness. Oh, you can count on me to be on your side. Oh boy. To be on your side. Friendliness begets friendliness. Friendliness begets friendliness. Page 122. Where the initiation of interactions is concerned, no approach sets the tone more effectively than gentleness and affability, even if the other person is a source of pain. I want to write that word down too. Affability. AFFABILLITY. Even if the person is a source of pain, frustration, or anger, a friendly greeting says, "You are worthy of my time. You are valuable." This subtle message has tremendous power, more than most realize. In The Seven Arts of Change, author David Shanner shares an incredible experience that taught him the immense power of being in a friendly way. He had been recruited by a longtime friend to teach Kiakido at the Aspen Snowmen's Academy of Martial Arts, just up the road from Pitkin County, Colorado. Local mail, made famous in 1970 when American journalist Hunter S. Thompson ran for sheriff on the freak ticket promoting the decriminalization of drugs for personal use. Tuning for sheriff on for personal use, tuning asphalt streets into grassy meadows, banning building an obscured mountain view, and reaming Aspen Fat City to dear investors. Thomas narrowly lost the election that year, but his sentiment set the stage for another, less controversial but equally unconventional man to become sheriff. His name was Dale Carnegie, whose campaign poster had cited Celicia Bach's vision of societal values. Trust is a social good to be protected just as much as their air we breathe or water we drink. Keynes believed civility and compassion should rule all law enforcement interaction, whether it involved violent felons or frustrated traffic offenders. It was momentous, momentous, M-O-M, gotta annotate that right now. I don't even know how to pronounce that. M-O-M, mentus. Momentento.
Momentous.
A great importance or significance. Monumental. Momentous. It's not monumental, though. It's momentous. Especially in its bearing on the future. It's almost like moment, but momentous. Interesting. Any of the ways, it was a momentous change initiative, writes Shanner and one that many thought foolish and unnecessary. Nevertheless, he moved forward in confidence. Among Shanner's first Aikido students at Aspen Snowman's Academy were Sheriff Kennett and his disputes and his deputies. Bob Baradas was one of the Kennett's key deputies and would go on to succeed him as Pitkin County Sheriff. Before then, Deputy Baradas would establish his legacy with a compelling display of beginning in a friendly way. Baradas was an imposing presence and fit the stereotype of a brawny, no-nonsense cop. This presence served as a stark and effective contrast to his demeanor with people. He never raised his voice, even in the midst of volatile situations. One event serves as a case in point. While Deputy Baradas was the patrol director, a dispatch came through that an armed man was holding all the patrons hostage at a local restaurant called the Woody Creek Tavern. Baradas was the first to arrive on the scene and form outside the building. He was apprised of the situation. The man's estranged wife was prohibiting him from visiting his daughter, whom he had seen in the restaurant. Rather than attempting a peaceful greeting, something clicked inside the man. He yanked out a gun and forced everyone inside the company to comply with his wishes. Deputy Baradas assessed the danger and took a different track. He peacefully approached the window, unarmed, seizing the deputy's affability. The gunman allowed him to enter the building. Baradas then proceeded to address the man in a civil manner, asking him to consider the consequences of his action, which could ultimately lead to him seeing his daughter again. Bob's placid demeanor, his rational discussion of the real issues, and his empathy toward the man's rage validated the suspect, writes Shanner. And the more the man talked with Bob, the more the man realized that much of his anger was with himself. He eventually put down his weapon. The man, whose demeanor had changed. Bob explained that exiting the tavern with cuffs on would put the law enforcement people outside the tavern at ease, so that neither Bob nor the suspect would run the risk of being shot. The man complied, and the conflict was ended peacefully. Consider this story the next time you sit down and write an email to somebody who has made you frustrated or angry. Will you begin with a civil, courteous tone, or let your emotions take over and jump into conflict? Will you take a few moments to inquire about the other person's life or work situation, or create a bond through some shared interest by telling them something about yourself? If you begin in a friendly manner, you are far more likely to get the positive results you seek, especially if you and the other person are currently at odds. I do not like that man, Abraham Lincoln once said. I must get to know him better. If you believe building a friendly rapport, I'm going to write that quote down too. I do not like that man. I must get to know him better. I feel like this book is just teaching me to fucking kiss ass. Suck it up, buttercup. Kiss my ass. That's what I'm reading. We'll see. We're still diving into it. Page 123. You believe building a friendly rapport will be critical to achieving a certain outcome. Using text chats or other short forms of communication isn't likely to get you very far. If you believe building a friendly rapport will be critical to achieving certain outcomes, using text chats or other short forms of communication isn't likely to get you very far, because of the limited space and the lack of intonation. and nonverbal cues to support your sentiment, it is very difficult to create the level of communication necessary to convey affability. Pretty sure I already wrote that word down, but I'm gonna write it down again. Nope, there it is. I wrote it down. To convey affability. Where am I? If face-to-face is not possible, at least use a medium that will allow time and space to convey a level of friendliness that in Carnegie's time ruled human relations. It takes creativity and a bit more time to replicate the effect of a warm smile and a firm handshake, but it can be done. Social media requires that business leaders start thinking like small town shop owners. Conquer's entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk, who wrote The Thank You Economy. This means taking the long view and avoiding short-term benchmarks to gauge progress. In short, business leaders are going to have to relearn the ethics and skills our great-grandparents' generation used in building their businesses and took for granted. The companies that can figure out how to mind their manners in a very old-fashioned way and do it authentically are going to have a prayer of competing. There was an age when people left their houses in their best attire and said hello to all their past on the way to work. When a meeting meant meeting, and when a call meant paying someone a visit, rather than using the phone. While our transaction spans the globe today, making such tangible connection more infrequent, it is still key to treat others in the same spirit you would if they were before you of this growing wine empire, Vanchik explains. We talk to every single individual as though we are going to be sitting next to that person at his or her mother's house that night for dinner. It is the proper perspective because it places the burden of accountability squarely where it should be, on the messenger's shoulders. The mistake many make today is placing the burden of accountability on the recipient of the message. We use the responses and reactions of others as the only gauge of whether we have taken the right approach or made the right impression. This is a slippery slope on two fronts. First, it can lead to laziness in considering motive roles in effective connection. If garnering a great response is the only measure of connection, then we easily become mere entertainers, provocateurs, and product pimps who think only about the next gimmick to grab people's interests. Shock value is worth little where true connection is concerned. Second, responses can be deceptive, especially in the beginning. A tweet may garner many retweets, but this does not mean that those relaying your message to others have become fans or even friends. They may be thinking of someone else who might benefit from the message or want to consider the product. Worse, they can have in mind someone who would laugh alongside their retweet at a lack of knowledge, sincerity, or tact. An online marketing campaign might, page 125. An online marketing campaign might generate a spike in a site traffic or print media campaign. Lots of journalistic buzz, but wise business people know this does not mean relationships are being formed. There is a big difference between engagement and interest. Interest is piqued. Piqued. That's interesting. Piqued. Interest is picked in a number of ways, many of which are less than genial. It often begins and ends on a superficial level because the preliminary or the primary emotions tapped are curiosity, surprise, or disgust. Engagement occurs on a deeper level when the person's core values are tapped. Common to all core values is the notion of being considered worthy of a relationship. When you engage another in a friendly manner, you convey to him, he is someone worthy of friendship, someone whom you'd like to call friend. It is for this reason he who sows courtesy reaps friendship. If you want to voice to reach through the noise and beneath the surface to others, motivates to moving into your direction, begin with a friendly way. The first impression that makes is far more memorable than anything the loudest or most provocative attention grabber on the planet could come up with. Years ago, when Carnegie was barefoot boy walking through the woods to a country school in northwest Missouri, he read a fable about the sun and the wind. It serves as a vivid reminder the power of this principle of earning others' trust. The sun and the wind debated about which was stronger, and the wind said, "I'll prove I am. See the old man down there with the coat? I bet I can get his coat off him quicker than you can." So the sun went behind a cloud, and the wind blew until it almost was a tornado. But the harder it blew, the tighter the man clutched his coat to him. Finally, the wind calmed down and gave up, and then the sun came out from behind the clouds and smiled kindly on the old man. Presently, the man mopped his brow and pulled off his coat. The sun then reminded the wind that gentleness and friendliness were always stronger than fury and force. It's a timely lesson in an age that appears to divvy rewards based on greatest volume, speed, and splash. Such rewards mean little in the long run because engagement that endangers or engenders longevity is continually authenticated on mutual benefit and trust. If you don't establish a foundation for both from the beginning through the friendly sentiment, both become more difficult to secure with each passing day. Wait too long or take too many shallow shots at attention, and you'll be left trying to talk to the other into a relationship. It's never the place you want to be, begging for commitment. Engagement has to be heartfelt, writes Vanderchuck, or it won't work. You cannot underestimate people's ability to spot a soulless bureaucratic tactic a million miles away. It's a big reason why so many companies that have dipped a toe in social media waters have failed miserably. Winning friends begins with friendliness. And sweet. We are living the dream, folks. Page 127. I'm surprised my voice has held up this long, to be honest. Access affinity. Like, friend, follow, share. In the digital age, affinity often exists before we share the first hello. In Carnegie's time, friendship and commonality walked hand in hand. You met, you talked, you found common ground, and with it, a fondness that led to deeper friendship. Today, people follow you on Twitter or belong to the same Facebook group or like your latest video on YouTube before you ever met. Often, there are numerous threads of affinity before you actually meet, with the particulars of what you like and dislike. Digital buttons and thumbs up include we give and are given permission to make agreements and disagreements based solely on affinity. We have points of affinity and points of dissonance, and more often than not, we gravitate and grant influence to those with whom we have the most in common. This can be a tremendous boost to building lasting relationships in which influence exists. We are not speaking of the law of attraction. You can think about having lots of friends with whom you have lots of influence, but nothing much will change if you do not take genuine, meaningful action to build those relationships. We are speaking of what author John C. Maxwell calls the law of magnetism. Effective leaders are always one that look out for good people, he writes. Effective leaders are always on the lookout for good people, he writes. Think about it. Do you know who you're looking for right now? What is your profile of perfect employees? What qualities do these people possess? Do you want them to be aggressive and entrepreneurial? Are you looking for leaders? Do you care whether they are in their 20s, 40s, or 60s? Now what will you determine whether the people you want are the people you get, whether they will possess the qualities you desire? You may be surprised by the answer. Believe it or not, who you get is not determined by what you want. It is determined by who you are. Like attracts like. In character and commonality, today, however, we can have a head start. We can ascertain affinity before we approach a person. Liking serves in the digital age as a perfect door to influence. When someone joins the same Facebook group, follows your blog, or comments on a website, he or she is saying yes to you. That creates an intensely powerful position to hold if you want to influence that person. When a person says no and really means it, a psychological cascade of reactions is taking place that is putting the person in a defensive position, ready to withdraw. But when the same person says yes and really means it, he is in a position of acceptance, of openness, of moving forward. So the more yeses you can get out at the outset of an interaction, even if have little to do with the ultimate proposal, the more likely you are to put the person in a mood to agree with you along the way. Getting to yes is so much easier if you start with yes. We have an obvious opportunity, a positive position from which to start dialogue. With the vast opportunities available to us, connect with the people who are interested in who we are and what we have to say. There is little excuse for starting a relationship or even a conversation on the wrong foot. To get to yes, start with yes. Can I get a yes? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. More than that, organizations have the power to get their constituents saying yes based purely on the influence of the community. Microsoft understood this well. When it released Windows 7, the computer giant had been dealt a blow with the exasperating launch of Windows Vista, a derided operating system, derided operating system, but it was ready to re-enter the fray with Windows 7, and it had learned from past experiences. It had to get its users on board right from the start. It had to get them saying yes. First, it had to find its fans, potential influences in the community of PC users. It empowered authors Josh Burnoff and Ted Skater, explore Microsoft's strategy for getting back in the ring. To combat the slick Mac versus PC commercials that depicted the PC as nerdy, insufficient, outdated number cruncher, it solicited "I'm a PC" videos directly from users via a page 129. We're getting up there. A YouTube channel. It edited them together to create a powerful beginning to their yes-based marketing campaign. When it released a beta version of Windows 7 to the targeted user, it trolled a feedback on blogs, Twitter, Facebook discussion forums, and other social communities in preparation for the market release. It centered a moderation feed of the content posted on a host of other sites and platforms and presented the feed on its website, Facebook page, and elsewhere, creating advertising featuring users highlighting the concept that Windows 7 was designed in part as a result of customer suggestion. Tagline, I'm a PC and Windows 7 was my idea. The coup de grace was how it got its fans to celebrate Windows 7 and to share it with others. It offered an opportunity to its fans. It made them feel important. If you were a Windows 7 fan, you could sign up to have a party in your home to show off the new features Microsoft would send along materials. Word about the party opportunities spread through social media. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Social media, and before long, tens of thousands of people in 14 countries had signed up. Microsoft estimates that the parties reached about 800,000 people, including hosts and guests. Considering how the release of Windows Vista had gone, PC users could have said no to Windows 7 right from the start, but Microsoft got them to say yes. When we start with yes, at the most basic level, we are creating affinity. But to turn affinity into influence, there must be a foundation of empathy. We must be able to constantly see the interaction from another point of view, so that we know the ultimate value of the points of affinity. Rather than use social media opportunities to help us start from yes and maintain the necessary commitment, we often ignore what others want and bombard them with our pitch. Instead of getting them to say yes, yes, we force them to say, stop, stop. Social media guru Chris Bogan calls it the blizzard of business, rather than communication snowball. Communication snowball. Conservation and relationships are based on several touches. In the traditional marketing and communication world, people would use each touch to ask for something, to issue a call to action. This isn't how social networks work. They are there to give you permission to reach someone who has opted into a relationship with you. It's a snowfall. Every individual flake doesn't mean a lot, but the body of work can change everything. You have to offer them what they want in your communication if you want to begin and remain at yes. Only then you have earned a level of trust that permits you to confidently offer others your pitch, whether it's for a product, service, or cause. Of course, this principle is equally relevant and required outside the digital realm. A newspaper company had a policy delivering a new paper to customers who called to complain that their papers had been damaged by inclement weather. But over time, rising gas prices and fewer subscriptions made it financially impossible to remain the practice. So they sent what they believed to be a very friendly letter to their customers. It began something like this. Dear valued customer, we will no longer deliver replacement newspapers when previously delivered newspapers have been damaged by weather. They went on to explain the change in policy, and then the very end of the letter, they wrote this. If you do not receive a damaged newspaper, please let us know, and we will refund the price of the newspaper on your next bill. The first response customers might have when reading this letter is irritation and protest. By the end of the letter, they too worked up to care that an alternative and possibly better one is being offered. What if instead the company had written the letter as follows? Dear valued customer, we recognize how frustrating it can be when the paper you received is damaged due to the weather. Yes, it is. You may pay for the product and service and expect quality in both areas. Yes, I do. Page 131. Holy poop. I am pooped. It's 2:10 a.m. All 30, all 40, all 50, all 60, all 70, all 80, all 90. I got like 70 pages left. I'll do one more. I'll do 10 more pages if by the time I get back someone dropped a like in my YouTube. I see somebody watching on my YouTube stream and they haven't liked my video. They're just watching. So I'm gonna go get some water, and if they like by the time I get back, then I'll read 10 more pages, and if they don't like by the time I get back, I guess I'll finish the 70 pages tomorrow, because I'm kind of tired. But we'll see. On my way back, I'm gonna get some water. Be right back. And they did not like it. So I guess we're ending the stream here because they didn't like it. I hope whoever is watching this in the future, you do end up liking the video and subscribing, because it would really help the channel out if you did so. Nonetheless, I appreciate you guys. Oh my goodness, there's another person watching. Alright, now's your chance. I know you're just logged on and you're probably not going to stay long, but if you like this video right now, I will read another 10 pages. And if you don't like the video and you leave, they left. Alright, have a good night, guys. I'm out of here. I am out of here. Oh man, that was too funny. But nonetheless, I'm tired. I need to get some sleep. I will try my best. 70 pages in one day. Let's wrap this book up today, right when I wake up. Roll out of bed, do some stretches, start streaming again. I think that will be good. I'll be fresh, awake, cognitive, all that fun jazz. So I'll see you guys then. Hope you guys enjoyed the stream. And yeah. That's all I got. All I got for now. Take it easy. Chilling. Peace. Have a good night.